I'm your host, Chris Bogue, and this is my show on LinkedIn Live where I have conversations with cool people who will help you work more creatively. Today, my guest is Juma Bannister. Juma, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Chris. I went through a lot of stuff to be here today, but it's good to have landed to be in the studio with you.
Excellent. Well, why don't you just kick us off by briefly telling the audience who you are and where they can find you.
Okay, so I'm Juma Bannister. I am the Executive Creative Director of Relate Studios. That's the formal part. But more than that, I'm a tall person and I love to create video. I'm a teacher. I'm a content creator. And if you want to check me out, you can look on LinkedIn. Just look for the guy with the red banner, red background, and red shirt, and scan the QR code because it's a quick way to get there. I can see Chris was pointing at it. So that's all good.
Yeah, he is a tough guy to miss. When you see Juma, you will know him. He has a very signature look about him. Go follow him on LinkedIn for awesome video content creation advice. And this is probably the part of the show where I should introduce myself as well. So I had a bell around here that I usually ring, but it's okay. My name is Chris Bogue. I am your host. I coach people to create mercifully short video content that drives revenue. Sometimes those are prospecting videos for sales. Sometimes those are video content for LinkedIn or YouTube or TikTok, but it's all personal. It's all you. And this is the show where I talk to cool people about the creative process and about how to use your creative skills to make you money. So Juma and I are going to be talking today. Our episode topic is, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
How do you find the balance between your personal story and your expertise? So Juma is exactly the person I want to be talking about that today. But before I ask him anything, I want to hear from you, audience. So welcome if you are listening to this live on LinkedIn or YouTube or whichever platform you're watching us live. If so, go ahead and drop us a comment. Let us know where you are watching the show from today. If you don't comment anything, Juma and I will not know that you're here. So go ahead, say hi, let us know where you're posting from. And if you have any questions about us or the content creation process or the way we organize our days or anything at all, just leave comments throughout the episode. Juma and I are going to try as hard as we can to answer every single question before the episode is done. So now that has been established, Juma, welcome. You run a company called Useful Content.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that the useful content is a part of what I do. That's the podcast name, and that's some of the services that we offer. But really, the company's name is actually Relate Studios. And so how it's framed up is that we create useful content so that we can build relationship, hence the Relate Studios.
So are those two different things? Usefulness and relatability, are those separate or are those intertwined?
Very much intertwined. So I have a definition for useful content. One of the characteristics of it is relatability, making sure that the thing is about the person you're talking to and not necessarily about you. So your primary focus is on the people who you're talking to, which in video and in content should really be the thing that you try to do with your content. And so make it relatable so that it is something that they understand. It uses language that they can understand and communicate in a way that they can see themselves in order to make it have the impact that you want it to have.
See, and what typically is the reason why somebody decides they need your services? What type of personality type are you usually running into, and what kind of needs do they have?
All right, so the people who we serve generally. All right, so how the business is structured is that the two different sets of things that we do. Right, one of them is the content strategy part of it, which is telling people how to use content in order to accomplish their goals. And the other part of it is just the production part of it, which is create the videos. So we can do content strategy for you, and then we cannot do the production part. So the company is actually a strategic marketing and production company. Mm-hmm. When I appear on LinkedIn, the type of people that tend to come to me and that I attract, and I actually have a definition for this, is most of the time I'm looking for clients who have been in business for a while, and they've been successful with referrals, with networking, with things of that nature. So the business is stable. And now they're looking to begin to drive the growth of their business with content.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are making a transition from doing these traditional things into doing a content-driven strategy in order to get new leads and to grow their revenue and grow their business. And so those people are generally people who are themselves tend to be strategic. They just don't know how to be strategic in the area of content. So it might be someone who is very personable because they've gone door to door, they've done cold calling, they've done things that have been able to grow their business because they know how it works on the ground. They have been in the trenches, they've fought for their business. Now it's growing and it's stable, and they're ready for the next phase of growth, which involves talking to people at scale. And those are generally people who we get inside of our business net.
So what's it like when someone's not relatable? How do you know? When have you watched a video and you're like, oh, that's not relatable at all, we got to fix this? What are the hallmarks you see when people do it wrong?
Well, okay, so you think the number one mistake I think people make is that they speak in with language in a way that normal people just don't understand, or at least the people who they're targeting don't understand. They use language, jargon, references that they like and they love and they understand, but generally they don't use it in a way that people understand. For example, I think that when you are inside of an industry, there are a group of people who are we do work for. They are tech people. They're inside of big data. And so when they talk about data as technicians, because everybody who they speak to is a technician, is something to do with a server, some data packets, how much data can we move from this place to that place. And when they start to make content, when they were making content, all of the content was around these technical terms. And I was saying to that, yeah, the people who are buying your business are not technical people. They are people with needs that require your services, but they are not people who are going to know what a terabyte of this, a petabyte of that. You just have to speak with them about what are the problems that they might be having. Are they unable to get this audio or this video to these mass of people in the way that they want it to? So is it not reaching their customers? So they have to switch your language to talk about, hey, I can help you with your customers to get this data to you in the way I want you to get it. And so I think that's a big mistake people make, is that they tend to talk the way they would want to talk and not the way the people will understand.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, for an example of that, I want to dig into a story that you told me about as I was like pre-interviewing you for this episode. It stuck in my head and it made me think about something that I have dealt with a lot as a video creator. You told me about a story where you were reviewing your own video content early on in your career as a creator.
Yeah.
And you were too confident. You actually needed to dial yourself down a bit because you were too confident on video. And I can actually relate to that, but I'm curious to hear about your thought process. What were you doing? How were you able to admit this to yourself? And how could it be a problem to be too confident on video?
Yeah, I think for me, a big part of the problem was that I am someone who is very sure that I can do something when I put my hands on it. And if you are like that when you're creating video, it's highly likely that you would not be able to see your mistakes fast enough. Mm-hmm. And so you would stop yourself from growing in the way you want to grow. And I'm not sure, I'm sure there was a moment in that story that I spoke about when I actually had this realization. I can't remember what that moment is right now, but I can say for sure that what I decided I would do is I would approach it from a place of, I want to learn, I want to know more about this thing, instead of approaching from the place of, yeah, I think I know everything that I need to know. I think I'm only going to grow as much as I am able to say, okay, this is not my expertise, but I wanted to become my expertise. And so I am willing to learn from people. I'm willing to learn from myself, and I'm willing to learn in areas that I may not have touched before. And so I think me being very, very confident about doing the content really could have been a detrimental to me. But over time, I was able to just say, well, let me be a learner as opposed to being someone who feels like I know everything. And then after that, I was able to develop even faster.
Yeah, well, the story had came up because oftentimes you run into the opposite problem, right? I know I certainly run into the opposite problem.
Yeah.
Where I talk to people all the time, and like, if anybody didn't get from the weird instrument I was playing in the beginning, I do some weird stuff by LinkedIn standards,
Yeah.
and the number one thing people tell me when they're not a video person is they say to me, oh, I wish I could say things like that, or like, there's so many things I want to say, but I could never get away with it.
Yeah.
And my question to that is, what does it even mean to get away with it? Like, what does it even mean? Like, and here's the thing too, maybe this actually, you can speak a little bit on this, but I actually sometimes feel like I hold myself back. And, what I tell to people who feel like they're holding themselves back, or they're not saying the things that they feel they should say, I say, look at all the idiots who are out there doing great, talking about nothing.
Yeah.
Podcasts where people just talk about nothing, or whatever's on TV today or whatever's on the news today, and they do great. And I'm like, if a bunch of idiots can go out there and talk about nonsense, why don't you just go talk about something smart? Something that's important, something something that means something that could help another person. Like, even if you screw that up completely, how bad could it possibly be?
Yeah, I think it gets back to the heart of why I created useful content in the first place. And so what I looked around and I noticed was that many people were doing things that didn't really help people. And there are two sides to it. There's one is a business side, but there's also inside of my journey as a business owner and as a content creator, I really have a heart for young people, like people in school. And I've spoken at right now scores of schools about development in areas of creativity and content and so on and so forth. And I'm looking to speak at more schools to people who are transitioning from, in the Caribbean, a secondary school to university. And I found that the content that young people consume is not very helpful. Some of it helps in creativity, but it doesn't teach them things that they can use to develop themselves in a way for the long term. And I found that wasn't useful. And the second part of it is that in terms of developing your business, one of the big problems that I encountered is that the content that was out there wasn't really focused on accomplishing a particular goal for your business. What it was doing is just having fun or being funny. And I have nothing against entertainment, but I find that the mix of education and entertainment together makes absolute sense. And so that is why I created useful content.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I still struggle with as a content creator, and like, I always have to remind my audience of this in case they don't realize it, I am not doing funny stuff to have fun. It is fun sometimes, but the reason why I started putting sketch comedy into my content was because it grew my audience faster. And when I started doing content, I wanted to be a sales trainer. I wanted to zero in on video prospecting. So originally, all I did was just talking head videos about sales. And they did okay. I got good reactions from former sales bosses and random sales bosses, which is who I sell to, so that was fine. But once I started showing up in character, then things started blowing up. I closed like my first like 5-figure consulting contract on one of my big comedy videos, which was a big deal to me as somebody who had just started his own business and had never done this before. And it's also like I sell a course, and I'll pitch that shamelessly in just a couple minutes. But I've heard there's a real risk where if you have a useful course, there's bots and scrapers and unscrupulous people who will just take the information and clone it and undersell you or basically steal your content. And
Yeah.
for me, it has been a way to create something that's harder to steal. Like
Yeah.
I have, my course is broken down into like 6 modules, and every module ends with a comedy sketch that pulls you into the next module. And, you know, it's a very kind of immersive experience. And sometimes it's in the middle of a lesson and it cuts away to a comedy scene to kind of illustrate the principle that I'm showing them. And it's like, yeah, none of this is because it's fun. It's because like I've read the data and I know that the majority of people who buy a digital course never make it past module 1.
Yeah.
So I have to put entertainment in there. I have to make it an interactive, engaging experience. Otherwise, they're not going to finish giving themselves the knowledge that I have so painstakingly laid out for them. So like, yeah, I guess in useful content, do you ever have clients that are just 100% vanilla, speaking straight to camera, or do you always find a way to include some of that entertainment and make it edutainment instead of just educational?
Yeah, all the time. All the time people are vanilla. All bosses are vanilla. they all have been doing this thing for so long that they don't know how to be relaxed and be relatable. And here's the thing. The thing is this is that not everybody is meant to be like there are different levels of ways you could entertain. Some people entertain by being dry. Some people entertain by being over the top. Some people entertain by being subverting things. And so there are many different ways you could do it. Some people need the assistance of graphics. Some people use physical comedy. I mean, there are many different ways you could do it. And so I am just saying, for somebody to be able to communicate the thing properly, first they have to take their expertise. I know we're going to talk about that. Take their expertise, the thing that they're good at, that they've honed, that they've built, that is something that is valuable inside of their skills that they can sell and create revenue with, and mix it with their values, the things that they believe in, and the things that are unchangeable for them. Sprinkle inside of that their story, which is a trifecta of who you are. And then what they can do is communicate that in a way that is true to their values, but uses their expertise, and then could take some of their story to help that along and to carry things along. And so, yeah, I found that people sometimes don't know how to do that. And most of the time is the number one fear that I hear people talk about, leaders, CEOs, and it doesn't matter who. It could be someone who's just started a business. It could be a multi-million-dollar company CEO. The number one thing that I always hear is, I don't know what to say, which is really amazing because you're running a whole company. You do know what to say. And we just have to tell them, well, this is what you say. And the second fear is generally, I'm afraid I'll say something stupid or look stupid on camera and things like that. And and that's a whole confidence building thing, and being able to communicate that in a way that you're comfortable with. And so sometimes adding that comedic part of it, that entertaining part of it, gets people to relax and gets people to say it in a way that is true to them. So instead of being robotic, they can communicate like they're having a conversation with someone, and that makes it much easier for them to deliver the content in a way that is true to them and that the people could relate to.
Excellent. Well, I think that is a wonderful transition to part 2 of our show, which is Gimme Gimme. Juma, are you ready to do Gimme Gimme?
Let's gimme.
All right. So, for everybody at home who's never watched this, or maybe if you're familiar with the show, you'll know that we have a little tradition here. You see, there is a vicious piece of misinformation going around on LinkedIn, and we like to set the record straight. Some people think that the purpose of LinkedIn is friendship. Some view LinkedIn as something of a charity, with no purpose other than to just create value selflessly and grow as a human being. But we all know that's not exactly true, right? LinkedIn is actually the only social network that was created exclusively to make money. That's right, folks. LinkedIn was set up so you could post your resume and get a higher paying job or find new clients. So every time, we like to take just a brief moment where I can pop into character and my guest and I get to ask my audience for exactly what we want from them. So, Juma, you ready to do this?
Sure, let's do it.
Let's do it. Hello! It's Boss Bogue here, back with another episode of Gimme Gimme, the part of the show where I ask you for money. Juma! My audience is here. They're on LinkedIn, which means they have money. What do you want from them?
First of all, Boss Bogue, I'd like to say I love the work that you did with Vingman recently. Great work.
Thank you.
Some of your best work yet. I'm going to say I want the audience to go to my LinkedIn profile and I want them to go to my podcast. So my LinkedIn profile is in the QR code above. My podcast is useful content. Go look at it, go listen to it, leave a rating, leave a review, and that is what I want from you. Give it to me right now.
Yeah. Go do it. Take your phone out, switch it to camera mode, and scan the QR code. All right? I've watched your content, LinkedIn, and I know that it's not useful. It is dog shit. Okay? You need to watch Juma because not only will he teach you to make useful content, but he can entertain you by just sitting there. All right, if you didn't see our comedy sketch, I just had him make faces at the camera for 60 seconds. I could sit there and watch that literally all week. All right, this man radiates charisma and he'll teach you how to make something useful. If you do not scan that QR code right now, you are a fool. Go do it. Go listen to useful content. And while you're at it, why don't you give my website a visit too? That's right. You can go check out chrisbogue.io to get the complete guide to selling on video. And right now, I'm encouraging everybody to use the promo code NO to take $0 off my products and services because they're too valuable. All right? You know what happens when people take my course? They scream at me. They call me up and they scream at me. Why did you sell that for so little money? Why didn't you charge me more? Right? And I say, congratulations, you passed the test. You can sell on video. Now get out there and pay for a consulting package. Okay? You need to be making mercifully short video content. Your sales team needs to be making short, personal, professional messages right now, not tomorrow. And I'm the only one who can teach them how to do it fast. So check that out. Go get the complete guide to selling on video. We're about to watch an infomercial for that. But Juma, anything else you want to ask my audience for?
No, that's it. Thank you so much, Boss Bogue.
Yeah, thank you very much. This has been Gimme Gimme. Iggy, roll the tape.
Hello?
Is this Mr. Sherber?
It sure is. What can I help you with, brother?
Hello. You were not expecting this call. Do you have 17 seconds to
Hang
learn
on a
about
second.
mercifully short?
Is this a cold call?
I don't know.
You. Never call this number again.
Oh no! Another unsuccessful cold call. You probably don't have time to fuck off.
I got a quota to hit.
Are you spending hours every week cold calling and cold emailing but not seeing results?
There's gotta be a better way.
Introducing the complete guide to selling on video. Whether you're new to sales or a President's Club member, this fast and fun course will teach you to efficiently create short, customized videos that get results. The complete guide to selling on video is not sold in stores. Visit chrisbogue.io and use promo code GIMMEGIMME to take $50 off while supplies last. Don't delay. Get noticed today.
All right, we are back. So hello, everybody.
Hey, you're back.
That's right, I'm me again. If you're just joining us, I have Juma Bannister here from Relate Studios. We are talking about useful content, and we're also talking about infusing your personality into your brand. So, again, this is a tricky line to walk, and we're going to get a breakdown here. We're going to talk a little bit more into this idea of expertise and what does that actually mean. But again, if anybody's watching this live on YouTube or LinkedIn or whatever platform you watch us live on, go ahead and drop a comment. Ask Juma and I anything you want about video content. And let me ask you this, Juma. So I know you've been talking about how the content experience is kind of marrying your personality with your expertise. I see people change their expertise all the time. And I want to hear kind of what your philosophy is on, like, so just for the obvious example here, right? I have a huge segment of my LinkedIn that were NFT experts, and then they were TikTok experts, and now they're automation experts.
Mhm.
And it seems like they are experts about whichever new trend pops up on any given time. So, how flexible should people be with their experience, and how important is experience to the equation relative to your personality as an on-camera entity?
All right, so there are a couple of things about that. Am I in sync?
No, I'm gonna pull you out and pull you back in, and I'm gonna see if that fixes it. We've been having some problems with the audio earlier today, so let's just see if this works.
1, 2, check it a check.
Okay, you are back in sync as far as I can see.
Okay, great. So there's a couple of things about that. So I believe in compounding expertise, mainly because I myself started off as operating a printing press, right?
No, really?
Yeah. I literally developed film by hand in an autochromatic film in red rooms. And I worked with cameras that were the size of 2 rooms. Yeah. And so I operated a printing press. So that was the first part of my career. And then I went on to graphic design. I mean, I have a whole list of the things I did. I'll probably post it on LinkedIn sometime in the near future. But I'm a big believer in that each part of your process adds into where you go. Now, the big problem is that for expertise to happen, you have to apply that over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just change the thing that you're interested in tomorrow and then claim to be an expert. That would be a lie. And so when I switched over to creating content, I did not come saying I was an expert at the beginning. What I do, my general philosophy is that you have to do it every week for a year. And if you do it every week for a year, then you're able to get enough hours, enough practice to begin to call yourself an expert after a while, depending on how much you learn, how consistent you are in it. And I say in terms of that, when you get to that point where you've put in the work and you've done it for about a year or so, you still have to pull your old expertise in and use that as part of your story, right? So it may not be your current applied expertise, but the way you got to this point is part of your story, which is why your story is very important. For example, when we first started this company, it was a wedding photography company.
Mm-hmm.
We traveled to, I don't know, so many different places. We went to Africa, we went all over the Caribbean, we went North America. I mean, the company took us all over the place. And after a while, because we are so focused on, we've seen so many people get married and relationships and family, we have taken that whole idea of building out relationship and what are the key things for that to happen. Because you would imagine that on your wedding day, some people are very vulnerable. They're the most vulnerable they will be. And we get to be inside the room with that. And so taking that expertise of how to understand people and how people communicate, and then even following up with our couples thereafter to ask them. We did a survey recently of the people who have been married over 7 years, because 7 years is about the time when you get yourself in trouble. If they've gone
7-year
past that,
itch?
yeah, the 7-year itch. If we did a survey recently with everyone that's gone past that point and asked them, what are the things that they did in order to keep their relationship strong over the long term? And we're taking those principles and applying them to communication in content. And so that expertise is now feeding into what I do. And I would say that anybody who wants to be an expert in one thing doesn't have to throw away their old expertise, but use that as part of their story and use it as data to build upon the thing that they're going to do next.
Interesting. See, I feel like we're on a lot of the same wavelengths here. We may have gotten there from different places, though. The audience knows I have a background in sketch comedy, in improv. I've also done a lot of weird experimental theater, which is not something I talk about very often, but in particular, I studied at this weird niche theater in Chicago. Now they're called the Infinite Wrench, but they were called Too Much Light Makes the Baby Go Blind. And
What?
it's a show that's been running since the 80s. It's cool. You should check it out if you ever come to Chicago. But it's this idea of hyper honesty. You are not allowed to play a character on stage. You are only allowed to be on
Ooh.
stage as yourself. And it is
Ooh.
all about creating an experience with the audience. And yeah, it's unpredictable. Sometimes it's messy. They do 30 plays in 60 minutes. And this is part of why this idea of short video has been imprinted on me, because I had that. And then I also had sales where you don't have enough time to tell the full story. You really don't. And whether you're cold calling them or whether you're sending a video to them, you kind of just got to put a vibe out and create something that's easy to engage with or respond to. And then that can eventually lead to a conversation, which can eventually lead to a sale. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's this interesting thing because the audience wants what's real. And I'm always trying to come out here in a way that is a little bit more real than people expect. But oftentimes, yeah, it's just finding a way to let the person be the most themselves possible. And I'll give you just a very recent example of something that happened to me yesterday. I was coaching a client. He's an executive. He's a gentleman who has been very successful for a long time, starting to build out his video brand, starting to look into paid speeches and stuff like that. And he talks a lot about leadership. And I'm like, great. So he's talking about, I'm like, let's do a short series on these 4 different types of leadership. It's like the disc. There's like 4 different leadership types. And, I was brainstorming some ideas with him that he could go out there as. And he mentioned that he's a dominant personality type.
Right.
And as soon as he started explaining dominant personality types to me, he just lit up because that's the type of person he is. And he was speaking through this frame of like, yeah, this is the type of person I am. Here's what they're not good at. This is what the dominant people struggle with. And like, he just came alive. And when he was discussing the other types, the conscientious personality type, the influencer personality type, the relationship builder type, or whatever the other 3 are, he sounded like he was reading something that he read about somebody else,
Right.
And I'm trying to explain to people that like the more AI becomes a thing, the more we're just saturated with content all the time. You can't just be talking about information that they could find anywhere. It's like your intention as a storyteller is a crucial part of the story. And that's what AI generated content is missing, is like, why is this person giving me the information in the first place? And like, do you have a process to find that with people? Do you find that people are already kind of onto that? Or like, what is your experience with helping people kind of find this for themselves?
Yeah, the conversation is key. Conversation is key. So you sit down with a client and you have them explain, okay, you've been in business for 10 years. You didn't get here by chance. Could you tell me, what did you do before you started this business? Mm-hmm. And then they would go on to say, well, they never go on, they never itemize, like, I did this. What they did is they start the story. Oh my goodness, the neighbors' dogs.
I know. I've been not commenting on the dogs, but they have been have character this episode.
Yeah, clearly. Oh my goodness. Anywho, it's dachshunds, by the way.
Oh, my favorite. My dog is half dachshund, so she's very shy though.
Yeah, there's the 3 of them. Anyway, so they don't itemize like, well, I did X, Y, and Z. What they begin to go into is a story about how they got here. So let me tell you what happened. And they begin to explain, well, at first I was a fisherman, and I used to work on this rig and this boat, and we would sail to islands to collect fish all of the time. And then one day, the boss decided that he was going to retire, and he said, "You've been faithful for the last couple of years, and my children are not interested in fishing. So I'm going to sell you my business with all these rigs." And then the business becomes a supply port hub, and then the person gets into distribution, and now they have a manufacturing company. And then they have this story about how they got to this place, and then at the end of that story, they're like, well, we sold out the business and now we're in tech. and then that happens. It's like, how could you come from a fisherman to owning a SaaS company? It's so you and then you have to tell them about what you tell me, the lessons that you learned inside of building that business. What was that story like? And they can take those lessons and begin to create content around those things. So like in your example, you're talking about somebody who likes to talk about leadership and he has a particular type of personality. I would love to find out whether he was always like that, whether he was like that as a child, whether he was the one that says, we're going to play this game, and whether he would get to pick his team first, what would that be? Are the characteristics that define him as a dominant person? So I have this story that I tell. This is my personal story now, right? So people always ask me, and I don't know if I'm droning on too long. Is it okay that I continue talking?
You're the guest. This is your episode.
Okay.
You do whatever you want, man.
All right. So here's the thing, right? So people always ask me, well, why red? Why do you wear red? And the simple answer, if I don't want to talk much, I tell them, well, my studio director told me to wear red and I should have a uniform, and I just chose to wear red. The story answer is this, is that when I was a kid, I used to like the color red. And then there was this Christmas time when my parents decided to buy me a bicycle. And I didn't know they were buying it. It was a surprise. And I came down the stairs on Christmas morning. And when I came down the stairs and I looked around the corner, I saw that there was a bicycle. But not only was it a bicycle, the frame was red. The handlebars were red. Even the tires were red. And for the very first time, because I didn't have a bicycle for all of my life before that, I would borrow the neighborhood kids' bicycles and ride around. And on that day, when I discovered my red bicycle, I was able to take it out and finally ride along with the neighborhood kids and belong to this community. And that was the color that I associate with that feeling of being able to belong to community, called the color red. And so I could tell that story. No, this is an actual story. It's a real story. I didn't make that up. And yeah. I have a photograph of me on Christmas Day on the bike. And if I'm doing like a presentation with people and I tell them this story, they say, oh, it's not true. And I ask my mom, hey, send me that photograph, and she sends it and I put it into the presentation so that they could see it. And so that for me is like, if somebody asks me about the red color now, I reference that if I want to go deep. And so that's how you could use story to frame the thing.
Interesting. So my technique is similar, but I really set a goal of trying to ask the question I don't think they have an answer to. So oftentimes when I was in sales, and I still do this, I'll ask them about something that happened this morning. Because to me, if I learned, because prior to this, my last actual sales gig, I was selling education technology to universities. So it was like Socratic discussion, AI generated or AI based like discussion moderation. And if I asked them, like, what are the goals of your class? They already had that answer memorized. They've already told that story a million times. Especially in business, if you ask about the company values, if you ask about the goals, oftentimes these are numbers that, like, as part of the company culture, they have to repeat and they have to know and they have to internalize. They're saying it without thinking about it. Whereas if I ask them, what did you eat for breakfast today? They're like, what did I eat for breakfast today? And in sales, I would ask the question, did you get any good questions this morning? Was the first question I would ask in the sales meeting. Because I knew they would have to stop and think. If you ask them, what's the worst student you ever had? They remember that student. But if you ask them, what's the best question you heard this morning? They stop and they think, did I get any questions this morning? You know what? One kid did actually ask me a question. Yeah, and then they start telling me something real. And for the leader you were talking about, when he was talking about this dominant personality type, I asked him to list a bunch of problems he solves. I asked him to walk through a bunch of like his best qualities. And then I'm like, why wouldn't somebody listen to you? Let's just take 2 minutes. You got all this great advice. Why wouldn't somebody apply this? My closing question when I'm in sales, when I think I've got a sale, when I actually think I'm ready to close, I ask them, is there any reason why you would not want to do this? I just let it sit there. And
That's a good
then
question.
it is a good question because they tell me, you know, if they're like, I don't know, revenue's been low lately. I got to see if we actually have the funds for this or if this is like a next quarter thing. I know what the answer is if they went silent. You know, the worst is when someone is smiling the whole time and then they ghost or then they don't sign the contract and you don't know what happened. But yeah, I try to open up and ask them the thing they didn't expect. And then I just accept the answer, whatever it is. And yeah, I actually asked, I got that client talking about, you know, the dominant personality type. And I was like, if you were a young person, would you listen to you? Would you
Oh,
take that advice?
that's a
If
good
you
question
were
too.
13 years old? And he goes, absolutely, I would. And it turns out that's what kind of person he was when he was younger. He was the type of person who the coach said, go do this. And he would say, yeah, sure thing, coach. And he played sports. He was in the military. He was the type of person who, when he was not in a position of authority, he just listened to the person that was in charge, and he was able to
Right,
do that. And
right,
you know, for him, the challenge was like, how do I communicate with people that aren't like this? How do I
right.
get through to the person that doesn't listen to the authority, to the person who's too contemplative, who doesn't make decisive decisions? And that was the gap he needed to cross as a leader. And now it's turned into, oh, cool. Well, that's certainly relatable. We can talk directly to the leaders out there who have to, you know, fix these communication problems from their employees that don't talk the way they do and don't listen the way they do and don't think the way they do. And sometimes when you're a dominant personality type, that means stepping back a little bit, giving opportunities to make your team feel heard. And again, that's why I was so captivated by you explaining that story of you realizing you were too confident. And again, I've gone through that as well. I, like any content creator out there, I fluctuate between being way too overconfident and way too self-conscious and debating, hey, maybe my whole life is a mistake. But yeah, early on, I was like, oh, you got to be confident on video. And I would watch the video myself and I'm like, this guy's kind of off-putting, you know? Whereas I found when I take these moments where I can
Yeah.
be open to the audience and I can come to them as a guy who doesn't have all the answers, but somebody who is fascinated by the question. It actually does. I have all these moments where people will open up to me or they'll reach out to me and tell me like, hey, that really resonated with me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, I don't know. It sounds like you have help from people who help you take that journey in yourself. I know you have a business partner and maybe you can talk a little bit about how you find ways to find your own blind spots and how you find ways to get people to pull that from you when you're not able to find that from yourself.
Yeah, I've changed a whole lot. I've changed so much since we started the business. I've changed. We have really helped each other, me and my business partner and myself. And you know, it's something that you discover in the process. You don't always agree initially, but because of the structure of the business and how we do things together, he is free to tell me what he thinks. And that didn't just happen like that. That happened over a period of time. And I'm not always right. I acknowledge that I make mistakes and I don't always have the best decisions. But if you have someone that you can see objectively, right, and you're willing to listen to and hear how they want to shape something. I mean, because I'm the primary person in the business, I have the veto, I have the last say, but that doesn't take away his ability to say, this seems like the wrong path. This isn't correct, and we need to adjust as we go. And sometimes the biggest deal with running a business, and particularly with having a partner, is that you just pause, just don't do anything. Sometimes you want to do something so much. I'm the type of person who will say, let's do it now, let's execute now, we have this plan, let's go forward now. If you're into music, you know there's tempo, there's beats. Sometimes you just have to skip a beat and wait. You just have to wait, skip a beat and wait before you execute on something. And the timing becomes perfect if you do that. And so I think even with content and with creating things, it takes time to develop those things. And I have this process where we always meet on Mondays. Mondays is our meeting day. We always meet on Mondays. And I when we used to meet in person, we don't meet in person anymore. We meet online now. But when we used to have the office and we used to meet in person, I would walk into the office and I would say, I have to ventilate some stuff. Let me just put some stuff into the air. And I will offload everything that was on my mind and on my heart about the business. And he would listen, and then there would be a discourse about those things. And these are just the macro visionary things that have been mulling around. And then after we got all those things ventilated, we'll grab a few of those pieces and note those things down. And then we will start to talk about the uninteresting tactical stuff, like what projects we have to deliver, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that being able to have this external brain that is a supplement to who you are is always useful. And I know it's not necessarily a content thing, but it is something that helps with business.
No, it is. And it's this interesting thing too in business that I've discovered where like, actually the more I do it, the more I learn what a flex it is to have a coach, and how like really successful people have multiple coaches and they pay for help. And like, that's part of why they are successful. But I also see the opposite, where people, they don't want to get a coach because they don't think they need any help. And I try to tell them, I'm like, you know, I mean, I'm a Chicago guy, you know, so I like grew up in the 90s when Michael Jordan was playing, right? So that was just like,
right.
But nobody was ever like, oh, you know what? Michael's so good, we don't need a coach. Let's just not have a coach, you know?
Yeah, no.
And like when
Phil Jackson.
Phil Jackson, he's my favorite. I absolutely love Phil Jackson. He's like a huge inspiration to me, and his books, and just like, he has an ability to play with multiple different personality types that I strive for. And
I can see that.
I think people miss it because they see a lot of the comedy that I do, but I really try to focus on the personality types of who is in the room. And I tell people, like, Michael Jordan was the greatest basketball player that ever lived.
Good. Yeah.
He was not the coach of the Chicago Bulls. If Michael Jordan was the coach of the Chicago Bulls, never would have worked, right? The coach isn't Michael Jordan trying to coach everybody else on the team to be Michael Jordan. Phil Jackson understood the dynamics of groups. He understands how to work with different types of egos. And when you have a Michael Jordan on your team, you have to push him harder than everyone else. He wants to be pushed harder. But I always say, look at somebody like Dennis Rodman. And I think of myself as a Dennis Rodman type. Dennis Rodman, he had some demons. He had some issues. He was very much about self-expression. He was ahead of the game in terms of like, he would show up in dresses and he would kind of just like shrug off a lot of the media nonsense. And there were times when he was going through a really mentally rough time, and Phil needed to be gentler with him. He needed to be more like a father figure. Rodman didn't need someone to go harder on him. He needed someone to understand him, you know? And for me, I identify with Rodman because Rodman, like Jordan, I think is like the top sales guy on every sales team, right? Singularly focused on the scoreboard. That's all he focuses is like, I have to be number one. I have to be the greatest. I have to be the most whatever of all time. Rodman was a guy who was all about the reactions. If you watch that ESPN documentary, Rodman would stay late in the locker room, just analyzing the footage of, you know, the game. And he would notice what the players on the opposing team would be likely to do. He would notice their reflexes. And that was why he was so good, is he would know, okay, we're going to run this play. Jordan's going to run up the center here, or he thinks Jordan's going to run up the center. I know Jordan's actually going to run up this way. By the time that guy turns around, I'm going to be right behind him and I'm going to be in his way. And there's going to be nothing he could do about it. And like, you know, if you're a Scottie Pippen, you know, you're the lieutenant, you're the second in command. That's fine. A team is a group of different personalities with different strengths. And I think you have to be able, especially if you're doing the work that me and you are doing, recognize what kinds of talents that you have. Different talents accept feedback in different ways. They bring different energies into the camera. Yeah. And have you ever had experience with someone trying to push themselves and be something that they were not? Or have you ever pushed yourself and tried to be something you were not on camera?
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so I had my TikTok phase where I'm not on TikTok anymore. Just today I was talking to a friend about that and the reason why I stopped TikTok. TikTok for me was a big experiment in short form content so that I could understand how it works. And I'm glad I did it. But I had to be too much of the other part of me that it was too much. I had to be lean too hard into being entertaining. And I felt because I'm such a teacher, there was an imbalance. I can teach and be entertaining while teaching. I can't entertain and then insert teaching thereafter. So I think the order was wrong with me, and TikTok forced me to do that every single day, and it's actually very tiring to do that. If you have to create from a position of not your first strength, I can do it, I can execute on it, just like anything else inside of creativity. When you're asked to play a role or play a character, you can do it. But some characters are more tiring than others. Some characters take more out of you than other characters. And there's some people who, if you would know, there's some actors, they've been themselves acting for 20 years. They've just been themselves in every movie. They're themselves. And there's some people who are character actors who transform themselves and they immerse themselves and they don't change character on set and they go home and they're still the character. That is absolutely draining. And I'm saying, for me, in terms of creating content specifically on TikTok to get the type of response I wanted, and a few of my videos went viral. I checked a video I made yesterday. It was 132,000 views, and it's still getting views. And but I had to do too much of the entertainment first with education in it, and I don't think that's what I'm called to be. I'm called to be a teacher first, educator first, that can use entertainment if I want to convey a message and make it relatable. And so I think people should know what is their first strength and lean into that, and then add everything else thereafter. And that will make them be able to sustain creating content for a longer period of time.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I had a similar experience. So I don't know when the audience is listening to this. They might be listening to this episode long after it's been recorded, and I might be back on TikTok at Chris Sells His Soul. That was where I originally got the name from. But yeah, I went through the same kind of thing where I didn't really understand my purpose there. I understood on LinkedIn, that was a much clearer audience. There's a lot of entrepreneurs. There's a lot of sales professionals. There's a lot of people using video tools in sales. It is very easy for me to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing, even when I'm throwing crazy characters into it. TikTok, yeah, it's this interesting thing with the video platforms where I almost felt like, oh, I've got to go be like a TikTok employee almost. Like, and I don't know, we're nearing the end of our time here, but maybe we could just speak to a little bit to the audience about how the different video platforms have different expectations.
Yeah.
And you have to understand what you want, because if you try to do all of them at the same time, one, you're going to get overwhelmed. And two, sometimes conventions that work very well on one platform don't translate to the others. So yeah, what advice do you give your clients about choosing which video platform they want to embrace?
Right. Okay. So we generally, after we go through the whole who of themselves, the second who that we deal with is who do you want to serve, and or who you're talking to. So both of those in the same category. So at the top level of content strategy is who you are, which is what we talked about earlier, and then connected to that along the same line is who do you want to serve, who you're talking to. And if we determine who the person wants to talk to or who they want to serve, and we determine, okay, well, what is the best place they can speak to these people, then we know what distribution platform will work the best. There is a caveat to that. The caveat to that is that there are some people who are more comfortable doing certain types of content. If you are a video creator, then you could go almost anywhere these days. You could turn up anywhere. If you are somebody who's a writer, well, you may have a little more challenges with that. Maybe your own blog, maybe LinkedIn, maybe even X or Threads
Substack.
or whatever, a Substack or Medium or whatever it might be, whatever your weapon of choice is for writing. And so in order for them to be able to choose the correct platform, we often look at well, who do you want to serve and where your, I know we've heard this a million times, where do your ideal customers hang out? But that is married a lot of time with what do you like to do? And sometimes you could develop a liking for something after trying it out, but we want to start in a place that you're most likely to succeed. Because it's hard to do something for a long period of time. Like there's a terminology in my country, in Trinidad and Tobago, and it's different in different Caribbean countries, is something called bad mind, which means that if you tell me I can't do something, out of the sheer force of my mind, I will do it. So I'm doing it with bad mind. Like because you told me I can't do it, I'm going to do it. There's some people who cannot draw on that power. if somebody tells them not
I
to
know
do
all about that one. I know all about that. Anytime anybody's like, you can't do that, I'm like, watch me do it. I'm going to put on a cape and I'm going to go, I'm Vague Man, and I'm going to close a huge deal with some serious CEO just to show you that this is what serious people do. They don't stop, like, you don't stop laughing just because your bank account hits a certain number or your net worth hits a certain, it's like, no. I didn't know the word, but I am very driven by that. And I know people who, that's a very powerful force for a lot of us out here behind a microphone.
It's true. And it can work. But the point is that do something that you like and do it in a place that the people will appreciate it. That's basically it, and that is a formula.
Yeah. I get them to like, I don't know. I guess my whole sales style is like figure out who the enemy is and then taking their side against the enemy.
Oh, you do the for and against formula.
Well, it's like I just get them talking about the algorithm and how like everyone hates the algorithm. And I'm like, all right, well, what if you ran the algorithm? Who would you send your videos to? If everything worked perfectly and you could just send it directly to your people, who would get it? Is it the executive class? Is it the people that work underneath them? Let's get specific here. And it's like, I get them to tell me exactly if the algorithm, did their bidding, who would it go to? I go, okay, well, we can't make it do that. But my philosophy on the algorithm is it's not a puzzle that you can solve. It's a beast that must be tamed. So you can bend it to your will slightly, never completely. But if you're showing up in the right places, saying the right things to the right people, it's real. And again, my whole kind of the trick that I'm doing is always trying to figure out. There's always this little moment where somebody kind of lets their guard down, and they're like, "I should say this," but I'm like, "No, that's good. Go say that right now because that's the real you." And in your case, and if anybody wants to watch this, again, we're at the end of our time here, but go check me out on LinkedIn and go check out me and Juma's comedy sketch from this past week. Because I looked at Juma, and the first thing I said was, "This guy just has a magnetic presence on video, and you have this very emotive face." Where I'm like, half of acting is just having an interesting looking face and being in a situation where you are reacting. Yeah, you can do, and like, I could share the script tomorrow, but basically the whole first page is just like 8 directions of like, watch the script or watch the camera and be interested. Watch the camera and be bored. Watch the camera like you're embarrassed for the camera. And it's just you giving different facial expressions. And I could just sit and watch that all day.
I was thinking, how am I going to do this? It's like, okay, did you see the in-between? Because you clearly would have seen the in-between parts.
It's so funny. And that's actually why I love my job so much is I have these guests on and I give them the script. And this is the same thing I loved when I was doing stage shows at Second City. But it's like you write the script and you have it in your head and then you hand it off to another person and they make it their own. And anytime I review that footage, I come through and I laugh so hard because my guests always find these little hilarious moments that I never could have expected. It just comes out of them. And I could talk to you forever, Juma, but unfortunately we're at the end of our time here. So why don't you go ahead and just leave our audience one more time. If they want to find you, if they want to connect with you, if they want to hire you, where's the best place for my audience to find you?
The best place to find me right now is on LinkedIn, DM me on LinkedIn. We'll start up a conversation and we'll take it from there. So again, I'm the guy with the red background, black and white. I just changed my profile pic this week. I don't know if anybody noticed because it looks exactly the same. But red background, black and white photo, red banner, lots of red all over the place. Juma Bannister, you'll find me.
Excellent. Yes. Check Juma out. Send him a connection request. He'll probably accept. I don't know. I assume he does, but unless you're a scumbag. If you're a scumbag, don't connect with him. Everybody else, though, he's a nice guy. Again, you'll learn a lot about video content. Once again, I am Chris Bogue. This has been another episode of Chris Sells His Soul. If you are interested, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Check out Chris Bogue. You can also purchase the complete guide to selling on video at chrisbogue.io or scan the QR code you see on the screen here. Thanks a lot. And Juma, say bye, everybody.
Bye. Vogue with Bogue. Later.